So today we've come to Glen Urquhart in Inverness-shire, and Glen Urquhart runs from Urquhart Bay on Loch Ness in the east towards Strathglass in the west. But as we go further into the glen, we actually come here to Corrimony at the top of Glen Urquhart, and we get a real glimpse into the Bronze Age, 2000 years BC, 4000 years ago, and we can discover more about the Bronze Age through studying Corrimony Chamber Cairn, where we are today. So Corrimony is classified as a clava type cairn after the passage cairns at Clava, about 20 miles from here as the crow flies. And the significance of the passage in the cairn appears to be related to the turning of the seasons. In the case of Clava, the two existing cairns have their passages aligned directly to the southwest at the point of the sun's lowest depression, the mid-winter solstice sunset. So these cairns had a significant purpose in recording the calendar. They're almost calendars in stone, recording the cycles of the sun and the cycles of the seasons. And this would obviously have been important to what were essentially agricultural communities. They were also burial cairns. In the case of Corrimony, the body of a woman was discovered, or the remains of a body of a woman was discovered under the centre of the cairn in the 1950s, and she was in the classical crouching position, which quite often happens with Bronze Age burials. And remnants of quartz have been found scattered around the outside of the cairn. So clearly there were ceremonial and burial purposes, as well as calendar purposes for recording the seasons and the turning of the seasons. So as you can see, the cairn would actually have been enclosed or roofed over at one time. And the idea of passage cairns, or having passages that record the winter solstice sunset or sunrise, actually predate the Bronze Age. There's the famous Newgrange burial passage tomb in County Meath in Ireland, which records the winter solstice sunrise, and it predates the Bronze Age by 1,000 years. It's like over 5,000 years old. And we know from Newgrange, which is completely roofed over, that when the sun rises on the winter solstice, the sun floods into the centre of the tomb, or the passage tomb, or the cairn, and illuminates the white stones in the back of the cairn. So they were obviously very important moments for the civilisations. Newgrange also was a rich agricultural site, a Neolithic agricultural site. And similarly with the cairns at Corrimony and at Clava, these are on fairly good farming land. So we ask who the Bronze Age people were. Well, the Bronze Age originated around 5,000 years ago in the Near East, and it reached Scotland about 2000 BC, about 4,000 years ago, and it brought with it significant changes in technology through the use of metal making. That was the key. The making of weapons or jewellery or implements for everyday life. And there are quite a number of sites around here where Bronze Age artefacts have been found. In Balnallick, about 3 miles away, they found the shards of a beaker from the Bronze Age period, and also a shaving razor. So there's lots of evidences of the Bronze Age, not only at Corrimony, but for miles and miles in the hills around as well. So as well as the introduction of metal making, Bronze Age people also introduced more advanced methods of farming and enclosures for animals and so on, and field systems. And the cairn itself is constructed mostly from river-rounded boulders, most likely from the nearby River Enric. And this stone here is thought to be the capstone that sat on top of the cairn. And if we take a look at this capstone, we can find these cup marks, which are quite widespread in stones at various sites throughout Scotland. These are known as Bronze Age rock art. Go back to the Bronze Age period when people wanted to leave their mark on the stones. The purposes for doing so aren't known. There's various theories. Some people say that cup mark stones mark out sacred sites, or what would have been important sites to Bronze Age people. There are other theories that they might have been waymarkers on routes for drovers or travellers, possibly even waymarkers on some kind of pilgrim route that led to these sites such as Corrimony or Clava, and they're quite fascinating. There's also some speculation that there's certain instances where cup mark stones, cup and ring mark stones mark out movements of celestial bodies, but they really are a mystery. So this is them here. These are the cup mark stones at Corrimony. So these were produced by a very simple method of taking a harder river rounded rock such as this one and beating out an indentation on the softer rock. And that's how the cup mark stones came to be, and that's how the Neolithic and the Bronze Age people left their mark, because this practice even predates the Bronze Age. Glen Urquhart is really quite an interesting place to study various civilisations as we go through the centuries. At the eastern end of the glen, you have Urquhart Castle on the shores of Loch Ness. It was actually a fortress going back to Iron Age times. Urquhart Castle was besieged in 1297 by Edward I of England's army, but it was liberated by Andrew de Moray, who became one of William Wallace's lieutenants in the Scottish Wars of Independence, so it marks quite an important place in Scottish history. As you move through the glen, you can move through different eras of civilisation. For example, in the post-Jacobite era, following the Battle of Culloden, the Duke of Cumberland's soldiers waged their policy of fire and sword and famine through Glen Urquhart, as they did in many places in the Highlands. And going back further still, if we turn the lens down further back into the past, in 565 AD, St Columba was here on his mission from Iona to Christianise the Highlands in the northern part of Scotland, and he came specifically to Glen Urquhart, where he Christianised and converted a Pictish chief, and he waged his war here against Druidism and against paganism. And we can find many Iron Age remnants in Glen Urquhart as well, or around Glen Urquhart, such as crannogs, which were island dwellings on lochs, or vitrified forts, such as on the mound where Urquhart Castle, or the ruin of Urquhart Castle, now stands. So it's a very important place to discover various eras of civilisation.